Okay guys, this is going to be like a headless happy video because I don't want my head seen on this video, but I do want to teach people how to make bread at home because I've had a lot of interest in this and it just seems to be something that's easier to do if you can see someone do it. So here goes. If you have any questions, you can post them below, and happy baking. So we're just going to take the wheat berries. Now you can also make this recipe with whole wheat flour that you get from the store, but right now that's not easy to get, so we might want to just start with what I have here, but you can use what you have at home. So these are actually hard white winter wheat berries. They're organic, so that's just the kernels of wheat. And we're going to do something that seems like it's really hard, but it's not, and we're going to grind our own flour for our bread that we're making. So I've already filled this hopper with my grain mill full of the wheat berries, as you can see here, because we're going to be using a pretty big mixer batch of bread. So anyway, you just put your wheat kernels in, and this is going to turn these lovely wheat berries into beautiful fresh ground flour. So I'm going to turn this on. It's going to be really loud, and then I'll show it to you when it comes out. Okay, so we have ran the grain through the mill and made this beautiful freshly milled flour. So I'm just taking the lid off here just to let you see that we have made our own flour here in this wonderful Bosch Nutri-Mill that has a lifetime warranty. If anyone wants to look those up, Pleasant Hill Grains online carries these, as well as Bread Beckers. Anyway, you can make your own flour, and we can use this just like you would use any kind of all-purpose flour. So we're going to use this to make our bread here in just a second. Okay, so we're ready to start making the bread now, and I have 6 1/4 cups of water. That's because I'm using a Bosch mixer, and this is actually going to make 5 or 6 loaves of bread, batches of cinnamon rolls, dinner rolls, whatever we want to make with it. We're just making a universal bread dough. So I'm going to pour this in and begin the process, but if you're actually using a bread machine, then I can post the recipe below so that it's broken down for a 1 loaf recipe. So this looks like a lot because we are making a lot, but you can easily break this down to be a 1 loaf recipe, and I will post that below. So we have 6 1/4 cups of very, very warm water from the tap. I have 1/2 cup of organic extra virgin olive oil. Just gonna pour that in. Little trick here to get your honey to come out of the cup easily. I use the same cup for that, and I use the same amount of honey. So 1/2 cup of honey. Slides right out that way. Okay. Once we get that in there, we're going to actually add 5 teaspoons of salt because I'm making a large batch again, but it would be 1 teaspoon. So we're going to put the pink salt in there. The Himalayan pink salt has great trace minerals in it, so it's so much better for you than iodized salt. And then we're actually going to add a teaspoon of vitamin C powder. This looks a little ominous, but it's actually vitamin C powder, and I get this at the health food store where we live, which is the Whole Food Store in Murphy. Great little store, great people. And I get this because it really helps the bread to rise, especially if you're not going to add any additional dough conditioners and you're really trying to make bread with the basic recipes. You do not have to add the vitamin C powder. It just helps a little bit with the rise of the bread. So now what we're going to do is actually add our flour. I've been doing this for so long, I don't really measure the cups, but it's about 15 to 18 cups depending on the day. If there's a lot of humidity outside, you're going to find you need just a little more flour. If it's a pretty dry day, you will find that you need just a little less, but it's pretty much 3 cups of flour per 1 loaf. And of course, I'm having to add a lot more than that for this big batch, but you can also just do 3 cups per loaf. So we're putting this in, and I'm making sure that I cover all of the liquid with the flour. The reason that you want to do that is we have put hot water in there, and we don't want our yeast to touch the water too soon. So we're going to cover that, make sure everything's nice and covered liquid-wise, and make a little pocket with your measuring cup. And we're going to add 3 tablespoons of yeast to this amount. And we're going to keep that nestled on top just so that we can make sure it's able to be mixed in the flour before it hits the water. And now this is the part where if you're using a grain mill, you would just, if you're using a bread machine, you would just add all this in and turn it on the knead cycle and let it knead for about 20 minutes. But in the Bosch, I'm actually going to go ahead and put the lid on, which is over here. And I'm going to turn this on, and it's actually going to begin to clean the sides of the bowl. And when I see that happening, I'll stop adding flour. So this is the part you really want to watch, because there's my timer. But when the bread doesn't work for people, this is the step that you miss. So this is something that you really want to watch, what the dough looks like and what it should look like, because what's happening in here with the consistency of the dough will decide whether or not your bread is a brick or whether it's light and fluffy. So I'm going to turn it on. You see that it's beginning to gather the dough up from the sides. See how soupy that is? We're a long ways from where we need to be with flour. So I'm just going to add about a half a cup at a time until the machine changes sounds and it's also able to start picking the flour up from the sides. So we let it mix for a minute and we just keep adding the flour because we're looking for a certain consistency. You can begin to hear this machine gear down because Bosch is awesome. It has a transmission in it, just like a car. And you can get so familiar with making bread in this machine that you actually know when to stop adding flour by the sound that it makes. But if you're using a bread machine or doing it in a KitchenAid, you just want to look for the consistency. You heard that change maybe? Not sure if it picked up on the camera, but it's there. So I'm just going to take the rest of this and add my flour in. See that for just a second. Can you see how it's not as wet and clingy along the sides of the bowl and it's actually starting to pull away? That means you want to pretty much stop adding flour at this point, because once this mixes for 5 minutes on speed 2, there's going to be air incorporated into the dough, so it's going to dry out, and the bran that's in that fresh flour, the wheat bran, is actually going to absorb a lot of the moisture as this kneads. So we're just going to put the lid on this and wait 5 minutes on speed 2, and I'll be back. Okay, so our dough has been kneaded for 5 minutes, and just wanted Katie to get a quick shot there of what it looks like. So it's, as you can see, it's very springy and soft, and it has cleaned the sides, and if I turn it on, you can see how it has cleaned all of that, and so it is actually ready to be shaped into our loaves or whatever we want to make. So we will get to I dump the dough out and I just make an outer ring of spray. And now I'm just going to put some of this dough to rest for a second while I work with another amount, because I'm going to make some cinnamon rolls. So we're going to just leave our big, flinging dough. Anyway, we're going to leave our big blob sitting there resting. And I'm actually going to pinch off about that much of it. So that's going to be the base for your cinnamon rolls. So again, this is a universal bread dough. You can pretty much do anything with it that you would like. You can shape it into rolls for dinner, hamburger buns, cinnamon rolls. You can also make crescent rolls with this dough, pizza crust, loaves of bread. It's a completely universal dough. So, and now what we're going to do is I just spread this out with my hands, and you can see here, we'll do a little dough test so that you kind of have an idea. Keep your hands sprayed, because you do not want to flour your countertop when you're making the whole grain bread, because whole wheat flour, when it's freshly ground, actually retains all of the fiber and the wheat germ and the bran. So it's a heavier flour. If you add flour to this mixture after you have your dough right, it's actually going to dry it out, and your bread will be lumpy and it won't work out right. There's a little test that you can do where if you hold this up to the light, you should be able to kind of spread that out without it tearing, and see the light up here in the corner. I know that the gluten in this bread has been developed properly. You can see how satiny and smooth it is, and I roll it around there. So remember what that looks like, because when you're making your own bread, you're going to need to remember that this was able to be rolled in my hands. It's not sticking all over the place, and it's actually a satiny looking dough. So anyway, now I just have this little gadget here so that I can roll this out in my pan so that I don't make such a mess. Sometimes I roll it out on the countertop, but this kind of keeps the cinnamon and sugar that I'm going to add to this in the pan instead of all over the place, so it makes it easier to clean up and manage. So my children love the cinnamon rolls. I guess that's my most requested thing that I make at the house. And it is actually good for them, because whole grain bread is loaded with nutrition when you mill your own flour. So here we have this rolled out, and I've already melted some butter. About a half a stick of butter for this. It's still pretty warm, so when I spread it on, just gonna kind of spread it out there with my fingers. You just want to cover it. This is not rocket science. I couldn't do it if it was. Just put that over there. And then I have some organic cane sugar that I'm gonna just cover this with. This is a third a cup, so it ends up taking about a cup or so of sugar, but this is gonna make about 12 cinnamon rolls. So that's pretty low sugar breakfast, especially if you consider anything you would buy that's processed. So a little bit more, there we go. And then I use organic cinnamon with my dirty hands here. You might as well enjoy this. It's not going to be pretty, but it'll be delicious. So my kids like a lot of cinnamon on theirs. You can adjust that to your own taste. So once I get that in there, we get to get messy again. And basically you're just spreading this so that when you roll it, the cinnamon and sugar will be all over each roll like it needs to be. So that's what that looks like. And then I actually just start lifting the dough from here, and we're gonna roll from the end. So I just started in the middle and I rolled outwardly. Now I'm just gonna push and roll that up, just like that. And then as I work these edges, because I am working inside the constraints of a pan, I'm gonna do it a little differently than on the countertop. If you tear it, it's okay, because you're gonna have another layer anyway. So we get this rolled out like this, and I actually just start twisting it when I get to that point, because you're tucking in that bottom layer. Okay, I'll give my hands a little spray because they're messy. So you kind of have this little blob here, and that's where we're going to start making our cup for our cinnamon rolls. So I squeeze it out so that it's pretty even everywhere, so they'll be roughly the same size. That way your kiddos won't think life's unfair, right? Okay, so we cut one here. We're just gonna cut a couple of them just right on my pan. With each one, I'm just holding it, keeping all that good stuff from squeezing out of it. Any kind of a little knife we do. This is a little steak knife, but you can use whatever. You can take dental floss and do this differently. I'm just used to doing it like this, so keep it simple. All right, and now I've actually already had sprayed this pan, so I'm just going to take my cinnamon rolls, and if they look a little misshapen, don't worry, because once the dough rises, it's very forgiving. So that's kind of what they should look like. And then I try to put the smaller ones towards the middle, just because my oven bakes things on the edges rather quickly. So I put my larger ones there to the end. And if you have anything that's trying to fall away or escape, just stuff them back in there. It'll be fine. Once these start to rise and spread out, they're gonna look like a larger version of this, so it'll be fine. See how that came away? I'm actually just gonna tuck it back in and put him there because he's kind of a odd man out. So we're just gonna press them like that. Now you'll have a couple from the ends that don't have as much cinnamon and sugar. That's usually what my husband and I, we usually eat those just to try to have a treat but have a little less sugar. So we did get, looks like we've got 12, 14 of these with the little end ones. And so we're just gonna put these on a pan, on the stove, and let them rise for about 15 or 20 minutes. Okay, so now we're gonna take this same dough and do about 3 loaves of bread so that we have that for sandwiches for the week. So I just took about the same amount that I used for cinnamon rolls. You just kind of have to eyeball this, but it pretty much fits in both your hands. So I take that dough, and I've seen people be really rough with their bread, but with whole grain bread, you really don't want to abuse it. You just want to kind of encourage it. So I just fold it in like that. The whole reason you're doing that is to keep air bubbles from forming so that you have a big pocket in your bread. You do not want to overhandle it at this point because remember, we already developed the gluten, everything is done, so all we're doing is getting it ready to go in the pan. Keep in mind, whatever your bread looks like right now, it's just going to be a bigger version of that when it's baked, so you kind of want to be purposeful in putting it in there and letting it look like a loaf. Okay? And so we're going to just do that one more time. We're going to pinch off about the same amount. Again, about enough for 2 of your hands there. Well, hopefully you only have 2 hands, but anyway, we'll put that in there. We fold it into itself. Give it one little pat there to wake it up. And we're just going to drop it over here into its pan. And as you can tell, I just kind of eased it in there. Don't ever press your bread down because it's difficult enough for whole grain bread to rise. You don't want to discourage it by pressing it down. There. I'm going to do one more of these, and then we're going to shape some into rolls. So let me get this last one in the pan. Again, all I've done is folded that into itself. My counter's already sprayed, so that helps a lot. And I'm just putting him over here into his little home. And there we go. So we're going to get 3 loaves of bread, 1 pan of cinnamon rolls, and now we'll get some dinner rolls out as well. Okay, so we're just going to take what's remaining of our dough here. I sprayed my hands a little and the counter. So I just pinched off about a golf ball size of dough. And I just kind of take my fingers and I'm rolling it into a ball, kind of like we did the loaf. You're just tucking all the seams in on that side. And then I'm just going to place it in my pan here. I really like the stone pans for baking bread. Mine's very well seasoned, but it is a great bread or roll tray pan here. So we just give them a little pat. I'll spray my hands again. If your dough is too hard or stiff to make the rolls and it's wanting to fall apart on you, then you know that you added too much flour. Your liquid amount will always stay the same, but you will vary the flour amount, so you just have to be careful that you don't add too much flour. So we get these little rolls going. Spray your hands again. Pinch off about a golf ball size. And just roll them up inside one another. And when I finish this pan up, we will make one more type of roll.
3.
Okay, we have that pan of rolls ready to go. So we got 12 rolls out of that. And now I'm just going to make the cloverleaf rolls, which are just another type of dinner roll, and you simply pinch off 3 smaller clumps of dough, so not as large as you did for the dinner roll there, and you're just going to put them in there like that, and once they begin to rise, they come up and make a really nice cloverleaf roll, and you can brush those with butter and enjoy them for dinner. You're able to get, in recapping, an actual entire pan of cinnamon rolls, 3 loaves of bread, a 12 serving size pan of rolls, and then I'll probably only have enough dough to do half a pan of these, maybe a full pan, and then all of that was just from a 5-minute mixer experience there. So the Bosch is awesome for that, but if you do not have a mixer like a Bosch, you can use a KitchenAid, or you can also use a, and that one I didn't even roll, we're just sticking them in here. And this one we didn't have quite enough, so we just stick him in here and he'll just be a nice muffin type roll. Okay, so now that we have everything shaped into the desired bread that we would like, I just actually put these into an oven and I closed the door. The oven is not on, it's just there to keep drafts from happening. If I rise it on the counter, it seems like with all the movement in my house from my children and everything that they will fall. So I just put these in the oven and I let them rise for about 20 minutes. And then we turn the oven on, 350, and bake them. So this bread recipe I developed does not require 2 rises. So you can literally grind the flour and make bread, get it baked, rolled out, everything you need to do in about an hour and 10 minutes. So it's not impractical to think that you can actually make bread for your family and have time to do that. If you can find an hour and a half a week, then you can have this bread for the whole week made in that amount of time. Our bread has been sitting in the oven for about 15 minutes, and I just turned the timer off. As you can see, we have good doubled in size, and it's very light and fluffy to the touch. So one trick here is if you put your finger there and it doesn't stay indented, that means that your rise is complete and it's ready to bake your bread. So get Katie to come on down here. You don't want to move these a whole lot because you don't want to cause them to fall. But if you remember, these have doubled in size, almost. You just want it to be able to come up above the top like these are. And then I actually don't do anything right now except turn the oven on 350, and it takes about 25 minutes for this bread to be finished. Guys, so here is the completed recipes, and we have our 3 loaves of bread, some little cloverleaf rolls that turned out nicely. Just had 6 of those, actually 5 and a little tiny baby. But and then our cinnamon rolls, and then our dinner rolls, and then also our loaf bread. Now when you get your loaves of bread out of the oven, they're going to seem real crusty and hard, so you want to dump those out on a cooling rack, put some organic butter over the top of them, and cover them with a paper towel or a dish towel, and then they'll get really soft and springy. So anyway, hope you guys enjoy making bread.